Hey, everybody, and welcome to Getting Litty with It, the podcast where we review books and discuss them in relation to our lives, the world around us, and usually with humor. I'm one of your hosts, Tracy, and with me is our new host, Rebecca.
Hi.
So, Matt is on vacation with his boys this week, so he'll return next week, and Rebecca is now joining us permanently. So, welcome, Rebecca. How has your week gone?
Well, it was a hit the ground running kind of week because we had just gotten off Easter break, and I, being a teacher, we get right back into everything with this full week before state exams begins. So it's been busy at work.
Yeah, same. State exams are the worst.
Yeah, my students are very nervous, but I'm just trying to give them as many skills as they can get before next week, and then we're going to go into poetry. It's going to be beautiful.
Perfect timing. It's poetry month.
Yep, that's exactly why I do it every April.
All right. So I had an interesting session with my therapist today.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, we did a texting session because I was stuck at work trying to get my grading done. And I actually found that I was more honest and open with her over text messaging because it was easier for me to engage in the conversation. And I think part of it is because with my ADHD, by that time of night, I'm like, my meds have worn off and I'm having trouble focusing. I'm sure you've noticed it being my friend. And having her questions and stuff in that text message made it so that I could definitely see what she was saying. Whereas sometimes if I don't catch what she's saying because I have like an ADHD, I just like say, yeah. Because it's like embarrassing to constantly say what, because it's not that I can't hear, it's that my brain didn't process it.
Yes. So I find that I have two different comments for that. First of all, I think my hearing is going. So I'm now at the point where I'm constantly saying to my students, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, instead of what did you say? Because then it puts the onus on me and then they'll repeat it kind of nicer, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I witnessed that with my daughter as well. And I think that when you see the text, you have more of a time to think about and process what you're going to say before you send it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that can definitely be helpful.
And it definitely helps me get what I want to say out in a way where I can really put into words what I'm thinking. When I talk out loud, my brain tends to move faster than my mouth can.
Yep.
And it doesn't always make sense what I'm saying. And at least with a text message, I can edit it. And if I think of something that I forgot, I can insert it. And yeah, so I found that was I actually made some breakthroughs today.
Very good.
So that was good.
So I'm gonna age myself here because I'm much older than many people who are probably going to be listening to this. One of my teachers told me when I was younger that when you get mad at somebody, you should write your response down before you actually speak it. Like, take a break, go home, write it down. And we didn't have cell phones to text when I was in elementary and middle school or in high school. So that was something that I started doing. And then you realize your tone is more angry, and then you can rewrite it to where it's in a manner that would come off in a more nicer way for whoever you're talking to, and you're calming down. So that gets into our fun writing aspect of us, but that is definitely a good way to try to calm yourself if you're angry, is instead of yelling at the person you're angry at, go to your room, write it down, and then see, would you really want to say it that way to that person?
Yes. And a lot of times if I do that, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that I do that all the time because I'm a very anxious person. So if I think somebody's mad at me, I can't leave them alone until we resolve whatever it is that I think they're mad at me for, which quite honestly drives my boyfriend crazy.
But no. I have a comeback for that. There's an adage for relationships that you should never go to bed angry at each other, that you should always resolve it. So that's definitely warranted.
Right. But allowing the other person an hour to breathe is probably a good thing to do. But I'm so anxious. And a lot of that comes from my trauma as a child. I need to resolve things immediately. And it leads sometimes to me like apologizing when the situation wasn't my fault, but I'll apologize and take the blame anyway so that, you know, everything calms down. So I struggle with what you were saying about writing things down and then going back to it.
Oh, I'm not saying it's easy to do those. Those are things that that's got to do with your, with mindfulness
But I agree that it is the healthy way to handle things. So everybody out there, don't be like Tracy. Be like Rebecca.
Oh, no. I can verbalize what is the correct thing to do. It doesn't mean I'm always great at implementing it in my own life.
Yeah, isn't that always how it is? Like, I give my students advice all the time and tell them like ways to time manage and all this kind of stuff, and then I turn around and don't do any of what I teach them.
Gotcha. Well, they learn by seeing, so we could definitely get into the next section of our podcast now. You ready?
I'm ready.
So this week, Tracy and I read a book that is part of the Twisted Tales series from Disney. So this series, which isn't like a traditional like trilogy or ongoing series, they're all one-offs. But if you look it up, they have a bunch of different ones. So we read a story called A Whole New World, which, if you guys know, is part of the Aladdin world. And this story is essentially, what if Jafar got the lamp first? What would happen, and how would this story be changed? So the series goes into there's a variety of them. I see there's Mirror, Mirror, there's Go the Distance. There's a few different ones in the collection. There's What Once Was Mine. So it looks like something interesting to continue with reading in the future. And we were reading about Aladdin. Now, I'm going to tell you, I grew up with the Aladdin Disney series, the TV series, on TV when I would come home from school, and I would watch it every day. And I'm talking about the one with Robin Williams voicing it. So
yes, it wasn't there an episode where like Jasmine turned into a snake or something?
I think she also turned into an elephant at one point. Yeah, there was a bunch. It was. I remember there was like an oasis and a waterfall. Like I remember a lot of it. So yeah, there was. It was just one of those things. I would come home from middle school or high school and I would watch the Disney shows like that were on. And there were so many, Chip and Dale, Rescue Rangers. There was a bunch of very cool shows. I feel really bad for our current generation because they don't have them, but I mean, they have other things. So yeah. So this one is one that I have watched and read. I have attempted to read the original tale, and I do think that this is important for us to bring up in our podcast because I did read a lot of the reviews for this book, and there are a ton of them that are negative. So this book does start out with the first 20-ish% of the book basically being verbatim almost to the beginning of the Disney movie. However, the Aladdin story is over 1,100 years old. So Disney, while it created a very great story and TV series, was just making an adaptation of a story that's been told over and over for 1,100 years. So the people who were getting mad were mad about the changes that they did to the Disney story. And I'm like, are these people for real? Do they not realize that this story probably has many versions? And so I think if they had opened up their mind a little bit more to a new world, they might have understood that it's just another person's adaptation of a story that has basically got excellent themes that have lasted so long. And if you think about how crazy the themes are from 1,100 years ago that are still relevant today, which is what blows my mind when I think about this story.
And I think that, because I looked at some of the reviews too, I think a lot of the reviews that were negative, they kind of missed the point.
Yeah.
Like, the point is that it starts out the same as the Disney version, and then it takes a what if turn. So what if this instead of that? And that's where you see the changes. It's not a what if tale if it immediately starts off different. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there was that aspect of it that I think,
well, and then I think some of them completely didn't realize that Hyperion was a Disney affiliate. Like, they're going to keep certain things the same anyway, because it was probably a requirement for writing them. And we would have to read more of the different Twisted Tales books to see if that's how it goes. Maybe they do require them to do certain things. We don't know. We weren't the one who was asked to write this story.
Right.
So I feel like the people who didn't like it were just Disney only, and lacked the foresight or the academic wherewithal to look beyond and at the bigger scope. So I felt that those ones were pretty shallow, and I know that's a bit harsh, but they were pretty shallow, and they missed most of the points on that.
And I also think it's really important to point out that this book, I believe, was the first one of the Twisted Tales written. So generally, when you have a series like that's not connected and doesn't have a whole plan out thing, like these are one-offs, it sometimes takes a little bit to get your footing, right? Like, you see it with television shows, like sometimes the pilot's a little rocky and then they nail down what they're doing. So I think it's important to think of that as well. I'm not saying that automatically forgives all flaws or anything like that, but I think it's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind when you go into reading it.
Oh my goodness, I'm looking at the other books that they've written. So I was trying to see if it was different authors for the Twisted Tales or the same. There are the author who wrote this one did write at least 2 others, and one of them being Unbirthday, which is an Alice in Wonderland what if. Don't know anything about it. So this author has written other ones. I just don't I don't know how many, because it's, again, not an easy thing to look up, because it's not like on Goodreads where you could just click the series. They don't do that, because there is the author that we read was Liz Braswell, and there is another author called Jen Kalanita, I believe is how you say it. And so she wrote 2 others. But the one I really kind of want to read is a Twisted Tale that looks like it's Beauty and the Beast related. But anyway, we'll read them all eventually.
I actually have that one on my Kindle. That was the one I was going to read after this one. But there's like When You Wish Upon a Star. There's What Once Was Mine, which is
that's the Rapunzel.
So, and then Part of Your World is Little Mermaid. So I mean, it's a fun concept for a one-off series, I think. So,
do our listeners know that we also are writers?
I think that we touched upon it a little bit in the last podcast. Gotcha. I don't think that we've gone super into depth with it. We mentioned how we met each other.
One of the things that I do have in the back of my head is I do want to write. a story about Beauty and the Beast, but not like a twisted tale theme, but more of like a what happens after that book closes and the next. So that's something that I really, really would love to do. So yeah, these sound like a very fun concept. You're just basically putting a twist on it and changing the story.
Yeah, and that's fun. And somebody in one of the reviews said that it was just like a glorified fan fiction.
That's why I said it was shallow. I read that one. That was one of the ones that said that it was shallow. And they also said that the characters lacked growth. Well, you're not supposed to change the characters if you're twisting it and you're trying to keep it the same.
Right.
Like
you're supposed to keep the essence of the characters, and just their growth is in how they handle a situation that they didn't handle in the original.
All right, so let's get into Aladdin really quick before we give any, like, this is going to non-spoiler still. Aladdin. So Aladdin, his normal arc or journey for the Disney movie and pretty much for the regular Arabian Nights is he is a street rat who has a high moral sense. And no matter how bad his life is, he will still try to do what's best for other people, meaning he steals, but he's stealing to feed for himself and for other people who are less fortunate. He doesn't just steal for fun. So, and then we also see, like, he rescues Jasmine. This is in both of the stories. He rescues Jasmine because he knows that there are worse people out there, and he doesn't want this unknown girl who seems nice but a little bit oblivious to go into the wrong hands. Like, he is very moral as a character, and his arc in general is him being a moral character with a low pedigree, but a higher moral character than people with high pedigree. Like, that's who Aladdin is. And this book keeps to that tradition. Aladdin continues to have a higher moral character than the richest people. Well, not Jasmine, obviously, because that's his love interest, but you know what I mean. So I think that this book definitely does do some fun things on that.
Yes, they definitely stick with that character aspect of him.
And then Jasmine is the young girl who's like, why am I in this fate where I just have to get married? And at least in this particular book, it adds and have babies, which is, you know, the talked about thing in the Disney one, which, you know, makes it a little bit more adultish and in depth. But yeah, Jasmine is your feisty teenager who doesn't want to do what she's told, but not getting married seems to be, you know, I feel for the people that lived in other times, if that makes sense.
Yes. Especially females, because we have the option of getting an education, and you know, if we get to
at least in
America, we get to be independent, and that's a reality that isn't available to the women in this story, but most specifically the higher born women, which is interesting because you would think that you would have more freedoms if you were richer and more powerful, but you kind of have less. And you see that in the movie, and you keep with that theme in this book as well.
Yeah, so I'd love to switch to Genie, because Genie is in the Disney movie the comic relief. Yes. And he's kind of a little bit of the comic relief here as well, but I wish they had made it a bit more. We see his sadness at being trapped, which is what connects him to Jasmine. That wasn't really explored in depth in the Disney movie, but I wish they had, because as a teacher, and you are as well, I feel like depth isn't something to be shied away from for children. I feel like they can grasp the depth of things like that. And I think that as a child, I would have totally understood that if they had thrown that in there.
Yeah. You can breach very difficult very serious topics with children in ways in which they aren't traumatized, but it's important for them. And I think we're seeing that a lot more in more modern storytelling and more modern children's books. But that's definitely something that I wish they had done in the original movie too. Is, explore Jasmine's relationships with other characters in general. So
I mean, and then you know what we're forgetting to talk about? We're going the animated cartoon one, and we're completely bypassing the live action one, which was pretty good, but I only saw it once, so it's not like cemented in my head like the animated one. Did you see the live action one?
I did. I enjoyed it. I think that it did a better job than the animated one in making Jasmine a stronger character.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that there was also some controversy around it because of the costumes and the dance style. And, there's controversy around a lot of things these days. So I take that with a grain of salt. But I did enjoy the live action one. And it's you can definitely see how much we've progressed as far as how women are portrayed in fairy tales.
You know what I just realized? Sorry to cut you off.
That's
This
okay.
came out right before the pandemic. That's why I forgot about it.
Oh,
This came out in 2019, so it kind of like the world shut down after that.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
So,
and you want to know another fun fact? I'm taking my Girl Scout troop to see Aladdin next month on Broadway.
I've seen it. Matt and I saw it. It's really good.
Yeah, I'm excited to take the girls in. It'll be Autumn's second Broadway show. So,
yeah, it's really interesting to see the difference in the play versus like the movie, because for logistics sake, they obviously had to change some stuff.
Well, and I wonder if it's going to be more based on no, it's it's run by Disney, so it's probably going to be more Disney themed rather than Arabian Nights.
So, do you care if I tell you some points of it that are different? So
spoiler for the Aladdin on Broadway.
So they can't, it's really difficult to have animals be in the performance.
Sure.
Without it being kind of hokey. Like they figured out how to do it with Lion King, but that was because the entire production, everybody was. But because of that, they replaced Abu with he has like 3 friends that are like comedic relief and are all about saving him and stuff. And they replaced Raja as well, but it was so long ago I don't remember. She might have had like a handmaiden. But fun fact, when I saw it, the original voice of Jafar in the animated movie played Jafar on Broadway.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes.
I'll have to look it up. I don't know. Obviously, it's a different year, so it could be somebody else.
Yeah, but definitely look it up because he seemed to like really, really enjoy being part of it. So,
all right, I have to touch on the sad part about this whole series. I have not been able to watch the 1992 or the show, the TV series, for a specific reason. Do you know what? Can you guess?
Robin Williams.
Yeah.
That I've had the same problem, and Aladdin was one of my favorite movies from the 90s, like Disney movies.
Yeah.
Because Princess Jasmine, for the time, was a strong female, presence. So I like really looked up to her, because I never really related to like the princesses who were saved by their prince and blah blah. Like I always wanted to be the one doing the fighting.
Gotcha. So let's date myself again. I am a huge Disney fan, not like going to Disney World because my family couldn't afford that really when I was younger,
Yeah.
but every Christmas I would get VHSs of the Disney movies. So I had a huge VHS collection of the Disney movies, which I've had
Remember
to
when they
since
had to go in the
convert them.
vault and stuff?
Yeah, you couldn't get certain shows until they were released from the vault. Yeah. So that's
And it was
the
always
Disney that I
temporary.
grew up in. Yeah, it's
Yep.
always temporary. Yeah, I date you a little bit more than but I still have some of my VHSs because I haven't converted everything over, but now we have Disney Plus. But yeah, so I still want to have physical copies of it for some reason, just I guess sentimental reasons. But
It's definitely a sentimental thing. And you almost wish that you could do something with like the VHS covers. Because I don't know, it's a memory kind of thing, you know?
all right, so let's get into more of the story. So are we interested in giving the spoiler alert for the story and going a little bit further into the review?
I think so. I think we could spoil alert now and then.
All right.
If
you're not interested in this part, you may skip ahead. So what I like about the beginning, the changes that they did add, they were very subtle changes. And so while it did give the almost exact beginning to the Disney movie, I wrote down that there were 3 minor/major differences. The first one being that we meet Aladdin when he was younger with his mom before she died. And I really liked that aspect of it because it gave us a little bit of a homier feel for Aladdin. Whereas I feel the Disney movie in 1992 just jumps right into him being a teenage street rat. Yes. So I feel like it gives us a little bit more connection with him and his life. To continue with that, at the same time during this little, like, I guess it was a flashback, we meet Rasul, who is in the majority of the book and the movie, the captain of the guard. But we meet him before he becomes the captain of the guard. And he knows his mom. So Rasul and Aladdin like grow up together, essentially, just on different, flip sides of the coin. One was poorer, one, lived in a different type of family. But the thing that I thought was the most powerful part of the beginning, which sets up the next part of after the twist, was Aladdin had 2 street rat friends, Morgiana and Duban. So I think that those were the most powerful kind of points for the beginning.
Yes. And Morgiana and Duban end up playing very important roles for the rest of the story.
Not just to Aladdin, but also to Jasmine.
Yes. And to the plot as a whole. They're obviously the main characters are Aladdin and Jasmine, but I would say that they are next on the line as far as main characters go, because especially Morgiana, because she has so much influence over everything that happens that I think that her character is incredibly important. And I mean Duban is important too, and especially in like that third act.
Yeah.
But I think that she's definitely a little bit of a step above him.
I think that the reason that we could say that about her is because of the connection she makes with Jasmine.
Yes.
And Jasmine had no friends growing up beside Raja. So I really think that Jasmine kind of made friends with her, especially when we find out the ending. So I wanted to make a point going back to the character, like how that one criticism was how they lacked character growth. But I'm a teacher of early, age children, and I have a preteen. Jasmine and Aladdin are exactly what they should be for being teenagers. They're preteens / teenagers. They are rebellious. They I think that their characters are great. They're defiant,
Yeah.
they're boisterous, they're energetic, and
Idealistic.
yeah. So
Which
that is
is
definitely
so important.
One of the facts so let's get to the twist. Aladdin gets captured the same way we see in the regular show, where Jasmine is found, and Aladdin thought that they were coming after him, but they were going after Jasmine or him. He was kind of confused, but it was really for Jafar. Now, Aladdin in this show or book, doesn't know until later on that the old man in the prison is actually Jafar. That connection isn't released in that way. So he does get the lamp for the old man. The old man takes it. We meet Carpet. Oh my God, Carpet. I can't even.
Oh my God.
Carpet makes me want to cry. Carpet was my favorite in the TV series. And essentially Carpet dies. I'm going to just say it. It's all Jafar's fault. So we have Jafar taking it. Aladdin gets stuck, down, and it is Abu's fault, but that's what happens when you train your monkey to steal. He's not going to stop stealing randomly because you say no, right? So Jafar, let's go to Jafar now for a bit. Jafar's nature is evil, and we know this in the Disney movie, but I like his evilness here because when he becomes Sultan and takes over, guess what he does? This is a big spoiler too, if you haven't already left us. He kills the Sultan, shoves him off the palisade. I believe that's the correct word.
Yep.
So, and he also puts on curfews for the people. He puts heads on spikes, which is historically accurate. And I do love it when they do historical accurate things in books. And then this goes into the fantastical realm, tries to create an army of raised undead to love and serve him. And his ideal end game is to take over the whole world. Because I do remember, was that one of the jokes that he was like, oh, why don't we go to Baghdad? Well, if he's going to take over the world, it's not going to matter if we're in the next town,
Right.
It's going to be bad for all of them. So
I thought that the book did a really good job also of in a lot of children's movies and stuff where you have the bad guy who wants to take over the world. It's just like, of course, everybody wants to take over the world, blah, 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 blah. But in the book, you get a little bit more depth to Jafar. I mean, I wish we got even more depth, but I thought that it was interesting that we kind of got to see a little bit of his motives. He wanted everybody to love him. He wanted to be adored. He wanted to be on top. He wanted to rule.
Let's take this back to what you were saying early. Childhood trauma. Nobody loved him as a child.
Yep.
That's all he really wanted, was to be loved. But he wanted to be loved in an evil way. And he actually, he got worse, but more careless when Genie told him the restrictions. Sorry, I can't make Jasmine love you. That's one of the restrictions. So then he made it his mission to study black magic to
figure out how to break every single rule, which is why he raised the army of the undead, because one of the first rules that Genie gave him was that he can't bring anybody back to life.
Yeah. So we know that Aladdin's mom died, and they do talk about that. And I was really, really worried that he was going to raise the mother. But Jafar had never seen his mother, so it's like, whew. Instead, they just do Abu. That was in one of the battles.
I thought the same thing was going to happen, and I was worried about that too. Obviously, this book is a lot darker than the Disney movie.
So when they escape so Aladdin gets captured, and then he is taken to the desert. He gets the lamp, gives the lamp over, gets stuck. It takes him like a week to get back or something, because he's like walking back.
Yeah.
And by the time he walks back, Jafar has completely changed the whole outlook of the land. What I really love about books, and I believe that more people should pay attention to this when they're writing a good story, is we're talking about a major city with a ruler. So one of the things that I loved was the depth of the politics. And it wasn't like a depth of politics like, oh, we meet every advisor. And it wasn't like a boring. It was like, oh, Jafar throws gold from the sky, and now your gold doesn't have any monetary value. So we have inflation. It was very like, it was more like in a simple term, oh, he throws food to people, but then you have to get branded. If you want to be my loyal subject, then you can get more food. Like literally he was branding people with like fire. So I appreciate that it did get more detailed. And even when Jasmine uses the street rats as her army to fight back, and then it gets more people later on, but she realizes the depth of trying to retake her own home, and they have to do strategy and plotting. So like, it was really, I absolutely loved the depth of the politics in this story.
Yes. And I think it's important to point out that Jafar was really bad at strategizing for war, because that had not been what his job was prior to taking power.
Well, and
so
then
a lot of the times,
I wanted to just add, like, I know that the Sultan, Jasmine's father, he played in his room with his toys, and I didn't make that connection as being a problem when I watched the Disney movie, but I was also young and I haven't watched it in a while. But like, I didn't like, cause like I remember the Sultan in the Disney movie playing with his toys. I didn't realize he was neglecting his town, and that's why there were street rats, because that was just out of my depth when I was younger. But the town, it didn't seem like Agrabah had a war in a while. Like, yeah, there were poor people, but it wasn't like they were fighting people in the city, at least. Obviously, if you think about the rest of the whole, the 40 thieves and whatnot, when you're going and traveling in the caravans, there would still be dangers. But the city was just poorly run, not necessarily and neglected, but not like at war. So Jafar didn't need to be a war council advisor.
Right. And because of that, that's where his downfall came, was because they were able to think of what he would expect them to do, which would be the obvious, like fight, and they were able to trick him because of that. And I think that really speaks to a little bit of the depth of this book, because, and going back to your point with the Sultan and playing with his toys, there were a lot of aspects of the Disney film that were played for like comedic value or, for entertainment purposes. And I feel like the book kind of took some of the comedic stuff and was like, no, but that's funny in this movie. But if this was really happening, that would not be funny, or that wouldn't be good, or this person wouldn't just automatically succeed. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So let's go into the darkest part of this book. And we have to touch upon Iago. Iago is the parrot that is never seen in this book, except Iago does happen to go on every single coin, and it becomes like his symbol. And I really love that, except when I found out why. So in order for Jafar to have found where the lamp was, he had to give a blood sacrifice of something that he cared about. So he kills his own bird to find the lamp,
because the bird is the
only thing,
living thing that he loved. And there's a really cool parallel there. It's like a three-way parallel, because Iago and Jafar, you got the human and the animal, and they're the best friends together. And then you have Jasmine and Raja,
Love Raja.
the human and the animal together, and they're best friends. And
And
then you
Raja
have
becomes his scratch mark becomes the symbol for
for their
her whole
resistance.
army. Yeah, for their resistance. Yep.
And then you have Aladdin and Abu. So it's almost like showing us how subtly different they are and how similar they are, you know? Like Aladdin's relationship with Abu is a very friendly one. Abu helps him steal things, but it's like he would never put Abu in harm's way.
No, he steals to make sure his animal eats.
Right. Jasmine adores Raja. She worries about Raja, but she also strategically uses Raja as a soldier.
And Raja's a badass. Let's just admit it. Raja probably killed a lot of those zombie things.
100%. And then you have Jafar with Iago, who's his only connection that's a positive connection. And his thirst for power, he had no problem. He felt bad about it, but he killed him.
Yeah, but I think he also went a little bit insane because before I realized he did blood magic on Iago, he was like talking to him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, where is Iago? Like, what did he do? I'm like, is he in his staff? Like, what happened? He was guilty. He felt guilt for killing him. He's like, oh, you're where you're supposed to be or something like that, which is definitely a passive aggressive form of abuse, besides the fact that he killed him.
Yeah.
It's not something to laugh about. Because to be quite honest, in the book, Iago is also a comic relief type of character. So we get like the jokes and whatnot from Iago, and I really loved the Iago in the Disney movie. But yeah, so let's go back to the jokes for a second. There were several jokes that were made in comic relief from Genie. Mm-hmm. But in fashion with the TV series, we get the comic relief that has references to things that happened at different time eras. Now, being one person who loves historical accuracy, the one joke that I laughed a lot at, like I thought it was very funny when Genie made a reference to disappearing like the people in Roanoke. It's funny. I get it. But I felt like it was a bit weird because this story was written in 900 AD and Roanoke didn't come about until like the mid to late 1600s. So that was like that. The jokes that he made, I would have preferred them to have been a little bit more realistic. Like all of the talk about the food and like the market were very historically accurate. Why would we not make the jokes from Genie a little bit darker too, is what I would have preferred. If I said that, if I had any real critique about this story, it would be the jokes from Genie being a little bit outlandish.
Yeah, Genie was my number one pet peeve for this book, which makes me sad because he was like my favorite part of the cartoon, which
nobody can best Robin Williams.
You can't top Robin Williams. But I felt like the book went out of its way to show that the outrageous stuff in the movie that was like funny and done for comedic relief, but that were outrageous, would look a lot darker in real life. But then
he could have still been comic relief, but a darker form of it. Like I wanted it more dark, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's not because you want Genie just as Genie to be darker. It's because when they darkened the tone of the story for the book, him making the kind of jokes that he would have made in the movie just stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
And it didn't provide comic relief because it took you out of the story.
I almost wonder when the author was writing this story, maybe she has done some reviews and we just haven't seen them. I wonder if she, like, what her audience was. Like, was she thinking that younger people were going to read this? Like, you know, like maybe like early 20s, like teenage, like what was the target audience? Because if the audience was us, you need to ramp it up with darkness because real life is really dark because you have heads on spikes. You have the Sultan being flung off of a balcony. Like, you made it so dark. We could have made some more darker jokes, but if she thought that the audience or was told to make the audience a little bit lighter,
then
that would make a little bit more sense. Yeah. So it's just
right. It didn't land for any age group. I feel I agree with you that if the target audience was us, it should be darker. But I feel like it also was. It was too descriptive for it to be for a younger audience. Like there was the part where the guy's neck twisted. Do you remember that? Where his neck twisted and broke?
It twisted around the whole way.
Yeah, and they described it in detail about the muscles and then the sound. And when I read that, I was like, this is great description, but now I'm confused about who they wanted to read this. It's not dark, and like you said, it's not dark enough for an adult. Like, there were places where they didn't go far enough, but it was too much for somebody who is a kid who enjoys Disney.
Yeah, so let's go to the captain of the guard, Rasul. I was a little confused about how Rasul died. I thought his arm just broke. And then later it was like he was dead. I was like, what? That was a little too quick for me. Like, I'm guessing he got crushed by a statue, but I thought he just died. And I don't understand. I that little part. So here's what happened. I was driving when I was reading that, and I was driving back from Long Island after Easter. So it was like I was getting out of the car, getting in. So I think I might have missed stuff, but like, how did carpet get left behind? I don't understand.
I honestly, I don't
understand how Jafar got carpet. Because so Jafar creates these zombies by raising the dead, but then he tortures carpet and cuts him into pieces and then ties those pieces around his undead army who have been marching the streets at night because he put a curfew and he doesn't want the people to be out for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, they're not allowed out. And if you're caught or if you're disloyal to him, he puts your heads on spikes. So very dark. Cool. Fine. And then later we get the flying regiment of the zombie guys who eventually we do get Rasul back. But I was just a little bit lost on how Rasul died because it wasn't super clear and I do believe I rewound it and listened to it because I listened to this book. I did rewind it and do it and listen again. And I was still confused. And I really don't understand how he got carpet because I thought they escaped on carpet and left Raja behind. Yeah, I'm confused.
So I honestly don't remember. I finished the book this week, but I want to say the first quarter of it, I read a while ago and then paused. So I skimmed through it again before I finished the rest of the book, but I don't remember the specifics of that. I know that I was horrified when it was revealed how they were flying. And I was even more horrified when they tried to make it seem like, yeah, it's sad, but it's not as sad because he wasn't actually a living thing.
I agree that, like they thought that carpet wasn't a living thing, but I know that Aladdin had used him, but then he lost him and then didn't think about him again. That kind of irked me a bit. Like, why wouldn't you go back to save carpet? I don't understand.
That seemed very out of character for him.
Yes. And then leaving Genie behind is also out of character because they had so when he rescues Jasmine, she's like, oh, I want to rescue the genie, and he's like, we'll do that later. So that was slightly out of character, but otherwise not too many. I don't have too many criticisms.
Yeah, that those two actions though were very big divergence from his character, because he has arguments with Jasmine over what to do with the book if they get the book, and he
remains true to his character. Like, we got to get rid of this evil book. So, we didn't explain what the book was. So Jafar is trying to find dark magic that will help him, get rid of the three limitations that Genie sets on it, like not being able to be loved. So he sends people his soldiers out, the guard out to find these books. And then Aladdin and the street rats keep trying to steal whatever he might find so that they can thwart him, because they're like, well, what are we good at? We're not an army, we're kids. Like, so then they're like, well, the kids are good at stealing, so let's try to thwart Jafar by stealing the books, which was a very cool part of the story. I really liked that part of the story. It kind of showed the interactions of Jasmine and Aladdin with the two friends, with Morgiana and Duban. And then we meet Duban has a niece and a nephew and his dad, and they're in the hideout. So those are all great parts to it, but they don't wind up getting the book because somehow, like, he figured out what they were doing. And he's like, didn't you see what? And he could project his voice to the whole town. That was pretty interesting, but part of his, black magic. And then eventually, Jafar captures Duban's dad and niece and nephew and puts them in this, what's it called?
It was an hourglass, like he put Jasmine in the movie.
Oh, yeah. I didn't make that connection. So he says that they have like one day to give him what he wants. And they have like an all-out war where, we forgot to say the guilds come to her in the street rat. And I feel like that part made it really cool because it made it like all of the guilds, like the jewelry guild, I don't even know what the other guilds were. They said a few guilds.
It was basically the
different groups of people that lived in the area, and they all came together and they're like, we don't like this either. How can we help? And then they all decide that, they're fighting for a better Agrabah, and then later they all decide, hey, maybe the jewelers can try to help out the people who are poor, and maybe like each community could kind of be better to each other, because they all want to have a better Agrabah, which is great. Except at the end, let's go to the ending of this. They eventually defeat Jafar, which there were some cool aspects to this, but I won't get into too much detail, just for time's sake. But Jafar had one wish left, and in his last wish, so I was hoping that they were going to get the genie and then make some wishes and fix everything, like get carpet back, because I love carpet, and this is supposed to be a Disney story, so I thought we were going to not have like a super sad ending, although we did have a good ending. But Jafar's last wish got rid of magic, and I don't care that Genie lost his magic, because I feel like that one, the loss of Genie's magic, kind of paralleled the live action, which is fine, but you get rid of the fact you really killed Carpet. Like, come on. I'm sorry. Really killed Carpet. That really, that.
I was right there with you. I thought, I actually got confused at one point because I could have sworn that earlier on, Jafar had told them he had used his last wish on something. So I was so confused when he was like, but what do you think I'm gonna I was not expecting that. I was expecting them to get the lamp and then have control of Genie, and Genie would help them defeat Jafar, and it would be an ending similar to, the Disney version, and definitely nice and light.
Not as light as I would like it. So we do get the darkness of Jasmine, and her darkness, in my opinion, is well justified.
Yep.
Jafar tried to marry her. He wanted her to be his legitimate wife and to love him, which she said she wouldn't do, and to have his babies. I think he wanted to marry her specifically because she was of royal bloodline, and he had killed her father. And she was stuck in this like system where she had to marry whoever she was told to marry in order to make, whatever kind of political marriage. And then at the end, she is angry and she really wants to use the dark magic, which she apparently had read up on because she is well read, and she had read up on some of the books that I guess they had been collecting. They don't really go into the amount of time that went by while they were doing the caravan chases. So it could have been a few weeks. We forgot to talk about the mamas. We have to come back to the mamas. That's the only thing we haven't talked about. But she wanted to kill Jafar or harm him or with black magic or whatnot. And Aladdin's like, no, you're kind of power hungry now. So he was able to kind of talk her off the ledge, but then Dubon kills Jafar instead because he had stolen his dad and his niece and nephew. So then Dubon gets like this.
Well, I wasn't expecting that ending because, again, thought it was going to be a Disney ending. Jafar doing that is so in character. Like, to do something spiteful like that, to say, magic dies with me, like, I think that was just, that was really in character, like that one last dig at everybody. But his death was kind of brutal.
It's okay. He deserved it. I mean, I'm not 100% anti death penalty. I'm not 100% for it, but I'm not 100% against it either. That makes sense. Depends on the circumstances.
But that's more clean than what happened to Jafar. Like, should he?
Well, I think that the problem that happened for Dubon was his niece and nephew saw it and they were like traumatized, and then they like weren't able to be with him anymore. So Genie wants to go travel the world, and Dubon's like, "I'm coming with you."
Yep.
Like, I can't live here anymore.
I totally fucked up my relationships, so I'm gonna go with you because you don't know how to live without magic yet, and it'll be mutually beneficial.
So
but yes, the mamas.
So we have to go back. We have to rewind a little bit. When they were deciding, they had 24 hours left before they had to do something. And they were like, well, we don't have enough people. We only have the kids for the street rats. And we had some of the guild, but I think they only had 300 people to fight all of Jafar's undead, which anytime one of them died was added to it, which was really, really disgusting and creepy.
Kind of Game of Thrones-ish with the
one of the women that had known Aladdin when he was young and had known his mom comes back up and she's like, well, what about us? What about the women? And the one guy's like, well, what are women going to do? And she smacks him in the head with a spoon. And they're like, so it was just, they wound up, they're like, well, some of these people who are dying are children. Like, and then the one guy's like, oh yeah, a mama that's going to fight for her kids, that nothing's going to stop them. So they were able to add to their numbers significantly with the women of Agrabah, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the last point, or do you want to add to that?
No, I think that what you said is great. And I think that, see, that was a moment where the comedic relief fit and it worked. Because it is a funny mental image, this woman just hitting this like basically war general in the head with it's like a ladle.
So the other thing that I wanted to end on is at the end, all of these guilds are helping Jasmine to rebuild, and their friend Morgiana, who is the head of the little band of thieves, she becomes the new what's the role? that Jafar was in?
Vizier.
The new vizier.
Yeah.
So they mention a few times that, oh, when you're sultana, Jasmine. And this is my little quirkiness of wanting historical accuracy. I went and looked up if this was even a possibility. So could a girl in the 900s have been a sultana? Well, the answer is yes and no. So a sultana is a title that is given to one person who would rule like a queen in essence, or the wife of a sultan was all, or like they didn't actually call them wives, because I believe that this culture, they were allowed to have many wives. So I guess it would be like one of the more powerful ones could be called a sultana.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So according to my research, this would never have happened for Jasmine. Jasmine would never have been a sultana, but it did eventually become a thing later in India. The earliest known sultana ever to have lived was in 1236 AD, which is about 300 years after this story would have taken place. So hypothetically speaking, we could say, yeah, she could have been a sultana, because sometimes, the time frame doesn't work. But for me, It didn't really happen in that area at all, actually. So it happened in one or two countries in Africa. It happened in the Maldives, and it happened in a few countries in Southeast Asia where this would have taken place, but none of the countries that would have made sense for this, if that makes sense to you.
It makes sense to me, yeah. I also think that it's believable in this story.
Because of the time that we live in?
The time we live in, but also because the story does such a good job of building up women and proving their worth even next to powerful men. And I think also the usage of magic, like by that point, magic is gone because of Jafar's wish, but it had been used throughout the whole story. So it kind of gave this essence of anything's possible. And even with it gone, you kind of get left feeling like magic's gone, but it's kind of Jasmine's their magic now.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain the feeling I got from it.
She has a fucking tiger. Come on, excuse my language. But
right.
She's got Raja. And Raja was a badass. Like, he fought. Like, she's like, oh, I see him running down the street fighting. Oh, he's running here fighting. Like, he was just, he was cool. I almost felt like, let's go back to Abu for a second. You remember when I thought Abu died? Because there was so Jafar had counteracted their fight by bombing things, and I thought he bombed where Aladdin said he left Abu. I don't know how Abu didn't get bombed. It wasn't really clear. So there was a few parts that were unclear.
And then that I felt the same way. And then when Jafar made like the fire Abu, I think I got a little confused at that part, because I was like, in my head I thought it was only showing people who were dead.
No, but then it showed Bon's niece.
Right. Like I got really confused because like Aladdin thought that his mom was gonna show up because she was dead.
And but I think he could only do who he knew.
Yeah. But so magic. Like because you get like an inner look at Aladdin's thoughts, his confusion becomes our confusion. And so I was like, oh, it's Abu. Wait, does that mean Abu's dead? Did he die? I was like extra confused. And I think those kinds of things could have been done in a neater way. that would have made things a little bit less confusing.
Yeah.
Like there's a few moments like that, like with Jafar's last wish, Abu, carpet. Like there's enough of those
Like, why did you have to
moments.
kill Carpet? Why? Sorry, that one hurt.
That did hurt. And like the weird part is that like Carpet was the only one who really died that we had a connection with, if that makes sense. Like Razul, you felt bad, but you were also like, happens.
He's a soldier.
Iago, you're like, well, he's with an evil
We never
guy.
even saw Iago, though. That was the thing. Like, Iago was a ghost in this story.
Yeah. So, like, Carpet was the casualty that we actually witnessed and experienced. And then they're like, yeah, he wasn't sentient, but you still feel bad for him. And it's like, no, he was. He was.
No, he was. Yeah.
And the other part that was really, really jarring for me, and was also a moment where I was like, there's no way that this is geared towards kids, was when one of the undead soldiers was a 9-year-old boy. Realistically, that's probably what would happen.
Yeah.
But that's not something that is generally shown in children's stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't play enough video games, do you?
Well, I mean, I feel like video games are different.
Yeah, no, not as much.
But it was very jarring. And then I felt even worse because, like, once they got the little boy to, like, listen to the mama, then I was, like, super sad because I was like, okay, but when this is all over, he's going to be dead again.
And then he was, because they said that once Jafar said that, they wound up, like, all of the bodies just dropped.
Yep. And
that had to be disgusting to clean up.
Dude, that was the
stench.
Other thing that, yes.
They
described the stench of them, which, like, I'm sorry, but, like, a lot of series that involve the undead, they don't take that into account.
Well, I feel like as an author, for many authors, I feel like many authors forget to even do the olfactory. Like, they don't explain the scent. Like, think about watching Tom and Jerry. I know this is a random. You know what that cheese smells like because you see it floating in the air. Or the cookie or the pizza, or, you know, like, think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's the pizza smell is going in the air. And you say pizza, you smell garlic and cheese and tomato sauce. Like, you know what pizza smells like as long as you can smell, right? So, like, but most people don't know how to describe that. So as a teacher of fourth graders, I actually try to help them understand that the 5 senses are pretty strong, but the one that's very strong is the olfactory one. Because you can actually put somebody in there, like homemade apple pie at Thanksgiving. You know, like, you can actually put somebody in different times with scent.
Yes, the scent of
it's a very
powder
powerful
in the air.
Like
100%.
The crispness of the winter air in your nose. You know, like, you could,
I think that if there was one thing that this book did really, really well, like the author did really well, was description.
Yeah, I liked it. I would have to say my rating would be a 4. I would rate this book a 4. There were a few things that I was confused about, which is why I wouldn't give it a 5. And you killed Carpet, so sorry, you can't have that 5. Although I feel like you killing Carpet made it realistic, but, like, that was the only casualty. Like, you didn't kill Raja, although I don't know if I could have handled that either, but
I thought that's where they were going with it.
I don't know if I could have handled both of them.
No, I'm sorry.
I think I could have handled Abu. I could have handled that one.
I think so too, but I think that's because they they made the connection with Jasmine and Raja
And Carpet saved Aladdin and
feels
Abu.
so deep.
Yeah.
And like you got the sense that Aladdin cared for Abu and everything, but they didn't make you care for Abu.
No.
Jasmine made you care for Raja.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would probably give it a 3.5 because Carpet, and also just like
The confusion.
There was confusion, and I just couldn't figure out who the target audience was. Like when I'm reading a story that I know is a young adult novel for like kids, I can go into it with the mindset of you're an adult, you're not the target audience, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was being written for my age, for
I think it was written for us in essence, but us like our age as previous Disney fans, if that makes sense. I feel like it was written towards the older aspect.
Right. That's such a highly specific target audience. So, well,
I enjoyed the book, though. I will read the other ones. I'll look into her other books. Maybe that being, I don't even know if that was her first book. She does have another book written, but it's not from that series. So out of this series, I think that is her first book.
Okay.
She did 5 of them in the series, actually, from what this looks like. Or, I don't know.
I would definitely read some of the other ones. It was a fun read.
She's done other Walt Disney Company.
So
Mulan, Aladdin, Sleeping Beauty, Little Mermaid, and a Disney as Old as Time collection, The Twisted Tales, 5 books. So she's done other ones. I just don't know. Okay. All right. So she's done other books. I just don't know if that was the first one in. I think it might have been the first one she's written in that.
Yeah.
Series.
So bottom line is
there's a new one coming out.
Bottom line is we would recommend the book.
In 2 months.
It is a fun read. Definitely not for younger audiences, just based on some of
like younger, like elementary school wouldn't really be appropriate, but middle school might be, depending on the cognitive abilities. I would let my daughter read it.
I think if it's a mature middle schooler with parental involvement, yes. I don't think it's a book that a middle schooler should just be handed and thrown into the wolves with.
Yeah, I'd let Autumn read it. Autumn's my daughter.
Well, Autumn has you. You're proving my point.
Ooh, what if Wendy traveled first to Neverland with Captain Hook? Okay, sorry. I want to read more of these.
That's okay.
It's
that's author. A good sign. It's a good sign that she wants
came
to
out
read
in 2020. More. Yeah.
So yes, we would recommend the book. It's fun.
And the series.
It's not. Obviously, it's not going to be like To Kill a Mockingbird. It's not a literary classic, but it's definitely worth a read. Definitely fun. Definitely has very good points and parts to it. So 100% I
would recommend it, even if it's just for fun reading, not for like, oh, it has to be my 5-star rating book. It's a fun read.
Yeah.
All right. Next week, we will be back to talk to you guys about a book titled Ophi's Ghosts by Justina Ireland. So I talk a lot about books with my students. They know I am a book enthusiast that has 7 bookshelves in my room, in my house. And I have a bunch of books just for them in my classroom. And I talk about history and I talk about all these different things. So one of my students, after doing one of her book reports on this book specifically, wrote me a little note and lent me her book, and this particular book, Ophi's Ghost. And this is her letter to me. I decided to bring my book, Ophi's Ghost, to see if you would like it. I love this book and thought maybe you would like it too. I listened to it every night before I went to bed on Audible. Love, my student. So we are going to look at this book, which was written last year, I believe, or was it 2001? So this book was released in 2021, not 2001. So here's what the back says. Ophi Harrison used to live in a small house in the Georgia countryside, but that was before the night in November 1922 and the cruel act that took her home and her father from her, which was the same night that Ophi learned she could see ghosts. Now Ophi and her mother are trying to survive in Pittsburgh, working as maids in Daffodil Manor, a place haunted by memories and prejudices of the past, and as Ophi discovers, ghosts as well. Ghosts who have their own loves and hatreds and desires. Ghosts who have wronged others and ghosts who have themselves been wronged. And as Ophi forms a friendship with one spirit whose life ended suddenly and unjustly, she wonders if she might be able to help, even as she comes to realize that Daffodil Manor may hold more secrets than she bargained for.
That sounds awesome.
Yep, so this one was recommended by one of my fourth graders, and I thought it'd be fun to read and get her book back.
All right, guys, that is our episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this literary journey. Thank you, Rebecca, for agreeing to become part of our podcast. Matt will be back next week, so you'll have 3 of us to listen to. So yeah, you guys can find us on shellfishbookblog.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.